My sister stole my identity and ruined my life. Now she's back and begging for forgiveness, but I've built a new life without her. I always believed that family meant trust, loyalty, and love. My sister Sarah and I were inseparable growing up. We were best friends, confidants, and partners in crime. Even when our parents divorced and our family fractured, we stayed close. We shared everything, or so I thought. I was finishing up my final semester at college, full of hope and dreams for the future. I'd just landed an internship that was going to open doors for my career, and I felt on top of the world. But everything came crashing down one rainy afternoon when I received a call from my bank. They wanted to verify some unusual activity on my credit card. My heart sank as they listed off charges I had never made: luxury items, expensive dinners, and even a trip to Europe. I was in shock. I assured them there must be some mistake and hung up, frantically checking my bank account online. My balance was almost zero, and I had maxed out all my cards. How could this have happened? I hadn't lost my wallet, and I was always careful with my finances. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, bank visits, and sleepless nights. I was drowning in a sea of debt that wasn't mine. Then, a letter arrived from a loan company demanding payment on a loan I never took out. Panic set in as I realized the gravity of the situation. Someone had stolen my identity. I went to the police, hoping they could help me unravel this nightmare. They asked the usual questions. Did I know anyone who might want to harm me? Had I shared my personal information with anyone? I racked my brain, trying to think of anyone who could have done this to me. Then the police officer suggested something that made my blood run cold. Sometimes it's someone you know, he said gently, a family member or a close friend. I dismissed the thought immediately. No one in my life would do something so cruel. But as the days went by and the evidence piled up, a sickening suspicion began to form. Sarah had been acting strange lately. She was always vague about her job and her sudden influx of money. When I confronted her, she laughed it off, saying she'd just gotten lucky with investments. But something didn't add up. I decided to investigate further. I managed to get into Sarah's email account, and what I found confirmed my worst fears. There were emails detailing the purchases, the loans, and even the job she had gotten using my credentials. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My own sister had stolen my identity and was living a life funded by my hard work and good name. Furious and heartbroken, I confronted Sarah. She didn't deny it. Instead, she broke down, sobbing and begging for forgiveness. She claimed she was in a tough spot and had no other choice. Her tears did little to soften my anger. The betrayal was too deep. "You ruined my life, Sarah," I said, my voice shaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes, but I couldn't find any sympathy in my heart. I had to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. I reported her to the authorities, a decision that tore me apart but felt necessary. Sarah disappeared soon after, leaving me to deal with the wreckage alone. My credit was destroyed, my reputation in tatters. I lost my internship and had to drop out of school to deal with the financial mess. Friends and colleagues turned their backs on me, believing the rumors Sarah had spread to cover her tracks. I felt utterly alone, betrayed by the one person I had trusted the most. Starting over wasn't easy. I moved to a new city, determined to rebuild my life from scratch. The weight of Sarah's betrayal was a constant shadow, but I tried to focus on the future. I worked 3 jobs, slowly paying off the debts she had incurred in my name. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but I refused to let her ruin me completely. Years passed, and life began to improve. I opened a small business that grew steadily, providing a sense of stability I hadn't felt in a long time. I met Jack, a kind and supportive man who understood my past and helped me heal. Despite everything, I couldn't fully escape the pain of Sarah's betrayal. It lingered like a scar, a reminder of how fragile trust could be. Then, just when I thought I had finally moved on, she came back. Moving to a new city was supposed to be a fresh start. I arrived with nothing but a suitcase, a few $100s, and a heart heavy with betrayal. My days were consumed with work. I juggled 3 jobs: waiting tables at a diner in the mornings, cashiering at a grocery store in the afternoons, and bartending at a local pub until late at night. The relentless schedule was brutal, but it was the only way I could start paying off the mountain of debt Sarah had left me with. The first few months were the hardest. I lived in a tiny, run-down apartment where the heater barely worked and the walls were thin enough to hear my neighbours arguing every night. I ate cheap microwave meals and rarely had time for anything other than work and sleep. Despite the hardship, there was a strange sense of satisfaction in knowing that I was reclaiming my life, one small step at a time. Gradually, things began to change. My relentless work ethic paid off, and I managed to save enough money to rent a better apartment. It wasn't much, but it felt like a palace compared to where I'd started. I made a few friends at my various jobs, and they became my support system, offering encouragement and occasionally dragging me out for much-needed breaks. One of the regulars at the pub, an older gentleman named Mr. Thompson, took a particular interest in my story. He was a retired businessman with a wealth of knowledge and a heart of gold. One evening, after listening to me vent about my financial struggles, he gave me a piece of advice that changed my life. "You've got the spirit of an entrepreneur, Emily," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Why don't you start your own business? You're already working harder than most people I know. Channel that energy into something that's yours." The idea was daunting, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I had learned a lot about people and customer service from my jobs, and I had a knack for baking, something I'd always done to de-stress. With Mr. Thompson's guidance and a small loan from him, I started a modest bakery out of my apartment. It was a risky move, but it felt right. The bakery took off slowly at first. I sold pastries and cakes to local cafes and at farmers' markets, gradually building a loyal customer base. Word spread about my delicious treats, and soon I had enough orders to open a small storefront. The day I hung the sign for Emily's Bakery was one of the proudest moments of my life. It was a tangible symbol of my resilience and determination. As the business flourished, so did my personal life. I met Jack at one of the farmers' markets. He was browsing my stand, and we struck up a conversation that lasted well past closing time. Jack was kind, funny, and had an easygoing charm that put me at ease. He became a regular customer, always finding excuses to stop by and chat. Eventually he asked me out, and I found myself falling for him. Jack was my rock. He knew about my past, the betrayal, and the struggles I had faced. Instead of pity, he offered unwavering support and encouragement. With him by my side, I began to feel whole again. The wounds Sarah had inflicted were still there, but they no longer defined me. Years passed, and my life stabilized. The bakery was a success, and I had paid off most of the debt. I had friends who felt like family and a partner who loved me unconditionally. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. Then, just as I was starting to believe I had left my past behind, Sarah reappeared. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and I was in the bakery decorating a cake for a big wedding order. The bell above the door tinkled, and I looked up, expecting to see one of my regular customers. Instead, I saw Sarah standing there, looking worn and desperate. "Emily, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I need your help." Time seemed to stop. I felt a rush of emotions, anger, fear, confusion, and a tiny spark of the sisterly bond we once shared. She looked different, older and frailer, as if life had taken a toll on her too. Part of me wanted to throw her out, to tell her she had no right to ask anything of me after what she'd done. But another part, the part that remembered the good times, couldn't turn her away. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She broke down in tears, collapsing into a chair. Between sobs, she told me about the mess she had gotten herself into. Her life had spiraled out of control after she left. She had fallen in with the wrong crowd, made some bad decisions, and now she was in serious trouble. She had no one else to turn to. I felt Jack's presence behind me. He had come in from the back room and was watching the scene unfold with a protective look in his eyes. He knew how much pain Sarah had caused me, and I could tell he was ready to step in if needed. "Emily, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you," Sarah continued. "I'm at the end of my rope. Please help me." I looked at her, my heart aching with the weight of her plea. She had shattered my life once before. Could I risk letting her do it again? As much as I wanted to be rid of her, I couldn't ignore the desperation in her eyes. The decision would change everything, one way or another. The bakery felt colder with Sarah's presence. The warmth and comfort it usually exuded seemed to vanish. Jack moved closer, his hand resting gently on my shoulder, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone in facing this. "I don't know if I can trust you," I finally said, my voice trembling with the effort to keep my emotions in check. "After everything you did." Sarah wiped her tears and nodded, looking more defeated than ever. "I understand. I know I hurt you, Emily. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm desperate. I have nowhere else to go." Jack squeezed my shoulder reassuringly, and I took a deep breath. "What kind of trouble are you in?" I asked. Sarah hesitated, then began to explain. She had gotten involved with some unsavoury people who initially promised her quick money, but eventually demanded more than she could give. She owed them a substantial amount of money and was being threatened daily. Her tales of running from one city to another, always looking over her shoulder, were harrowing. As much as I wanted to remain detached, a part of me pitied her. "You put me through hell, Sarah," I said, my voice firmer now. "Why should I believe you've changed?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I knew you'd need proof," she said, handing it to me. Inside were documents, therapy records, letters from support groups, and a few character references. "I've been trying to turn my life around, but it's hard with these people still after me." I glanced at the papers, not entirely convinced. Jack took them from me and started reading through them, his brow furrowing with concentration. "If I help you, there will be conditions," I said, meeting Sarah's eyes. "Strict ones." Sarah nodded eagerly. "Anything, Emily. I'll do whatever it takes. First, you're going to have to find a way to pay back the money you owe. I can't have you bringing that kind of trouble into my life. Second, you'll have to stay away from the bakery and my home. We'll meet in public places only. And third, you need to prove you're staying clean and continuing your therapy. One slip-up and you're on your own again." Sarah looked relieved, even grateful. "I'll do it, Emily. I promise. Thank you." With the conditions set, I felt slightly more in control. Jack and I helped Sarah find a temporary place to stay, a small but decent motel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was safe. I gave her enough money to cover the first few nights, making it clear that she would need to find a job quickly to support herself. The next few weeks were tense. I juggled running the bakery and keeping tabs on Sarah, all while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Jack was my rock, always there to offer support and advice. We had many late-night discussions about whether I was doing the right thing. He understood my mixed emotions, the lingering love for my sister clashing with the deep-seated hurt. Sarah managed to find a job at a local diner, and I helped her set up a payment plan with the people she owed money to. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. She attended therapy regularly and even started going to support group meetings. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of the sister I once knew. She seemed genuinely remorseful and committed to changing her life. But trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. I kept my distance emotionally, afraid to let her in too close. The bakery was my sanctuary, the one place where I felt completely in control. I poured my energy into it, expanding the menu and even considering opening a second location. One evening, after a particularly busy day, I was closing up when Sarah showed up unannounced. I immediately felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. "Sarah, we agreed you wouldn't come here," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "I know, and I'm sorry," she replied, looking genuinely apologetic. "But I need to talk to you. It's important." Reluctantly, I let her in, locking the door behind her. She looked better than she had when she first arrived, healthier and more stable. But there was a nervous energy about her that put me on edge. "What is it?" I asked, crossing my arms. She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what I did to you, and I know I can never fully make it right. But I want to try. I want to repay you for the money I stole and for all the trouble I caused. I've been saving up from my job, and I want to start paying you back." Her words took me by surprise. It was the last thing I expected, and it stirred a mix of emotions within me. I didn't know if I could believe her, but the fact that she was offering at all meant something. "Why now?" I asked, trying to mask my skepticism. Because it's the right thing to do, she said simply, and because I need to prove to myself that I can be better. I studied her for a long moment, searching for any signs of deceit. But all I saw was sincerity. Maybe, just maybe, she really had changed. I felt a flicker of hope, tempered by the painful memories of the past. "All right," I said finally, "but we'll take it one step at a time. Actions speak louder than words, Sarah." She nodded, looking relieved. "Thank you, Emily. I won't let you down." As she left the bakery, I couldn't help but feel a cautious optimism. Sarah had come back into my life in the most unexpected way, and while I wasn't ready to fully trust her yet, I was willing to give her a chance. It was a fragile piece, built on the hope that people could change and that even the deepest wounds could eventually heal. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, and I had no idea what was still to come. The fragile piece I had managed to create was about to be shattered, and deep down, I feared it. Sarah's return had been a whirlwind, and despite my efforts to keep a safe distance, her presence stirred old emotions. I had built a new life, and I wasn't willing to let anyone, especially her, destroy it again. A few months after our tentative truce, things took an unexpected turn. I was in the bakery early one morning preparing for the day ahead. The sun had barely risen, and the world outside was quiet. It was in those peaceful moments that I felt most at ease. Then my phone rang, jolting me out of my reverie. "Emily, it's Sarah. I need to see you. It's urgent." Her voice was frantic, and a sense of dread washed over me. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's too much to explain over the phone. Can you meet me at the diner?" I agreed, and 20 minutes later I was sitting across from her in a corner booth at the diner where she worked. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes and a nervous energy radiating from her. Whatever was going on, it was serious. "Sarah, what's happening?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "The people I owe money to, they're getting impatient. They want the rest of the money by the end of the week, or they're threatening to come after me, and you." My heart sank. "How much do you still owe?" "More than I can pay. I've been trying, Emily, I really have, but it's not enough. I don't know what to do." Fear and anger battled within me. I had taken a risk helping her, and now it seemed that risk was about to backfire spectacularly. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" I demanded. "I could have helped you come up with a plan, but now we're out of time." "I was scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to drag you into my mess again. But now I have no choice." I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly. The last thing I wanted was to be entangled in Sarah's problems again, but I couldn't abandon her to face this alone. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. We'll go to the police and explain the situation. Maybe they can help." Sarah shook her head vehemently. "No, you don't understand. These people, they're dangerous. If they find out I went to the police, it'll be even worse." Frustration bubbled up inside me. "Then what do you suggest we do? We can't just sit here and wait for them to come after us." She looked at me with desperation in her eyes. "I was hoping you might be able to lend me the money. Just enough to get them off my back for good. I swear I'll pay you back." The request hit me like a punch to the gut. I had worked so hard to rebuild my life, to claw my way out of the debt she had left me in. And now she was asking me to risk it all again. I felt torn, wanting to help, but also terrified of the consequences. "Sarah, I don't have that kind of money lying around," I said, my voice strained. "I can't jeopardize everything I've worked for. I'm sorry." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment I saw the vulnerable sister I had once adored. "Please, Emily, I have no one else. If you don't help me, I don't know what will happen." My resolve wavered. Despite everything, she was still my sister. I had to find a way to help her without sacrificing everything I had built. "Let me talk to Jack," I said finally. "Maybe we can come up with a solution together." Sarah nodded, wiping her tears. "Thank you, Emily. I'm sorry for putting you in this position. I really am." I left the diner feeling a mix of anger, fear, and reluctant determination. Jack was at the bakery when I returned, and I filled him in on everything. His expression grew more serious with each passing detail. "We can't let this destroy what we've built," he said firmly. But we also can't ignore it. We'll figure something out. Jack's calm strength was a balm to my frayed nerves. Together, we came up with a plan. We would pay off the immediate debt to buy Sarah some time, but only if she agreed to go to a financial advisor and work out a long-term plan to manage her finances. We also decided to install security measures at the bakery and our home, just in case. When I presented the plan to Sarah, she agreed to everything. There was a new determination in her eyes, a resolve to finally take control of her life. I hoped it wasn't just a fleeting moment of clarity. Over the next few days, we managed to gather the money needed to pay off Sarah's debt. Jack and I dipped into our savings, a risky move, but one that felt necessary. Sarah kept her word, meeting with a financial advisor and starting a plan to rebuild her credit and stability. As the immediate danger passed, a sense of cautious relief settled over me. Sarah seemed genuinely committed to changing her life, and while the scars of her past actions remained, I began to see a future where we could rebuild our relationship on new terms. Weeks turned into months, and Sarah continued to make progress. She paid back the money we had lent her, little by little, and gradually gained independence. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks along the way, but she persevered. One evening, as we sat together over coffee, she looked at me with a sincerity that touched my heart. "Emily, I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully make up for what I did to you, but I want you to know how grateful I am for this second chance. You didn't have to help me, but you did, and I'll never forget that." Tears filled my eyes as I reached across the table to take her hand. "We've both made mistakes, Sarah, but I believe in second chances. Let's just promise to be honest with each other from now on." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "I promise." As I looked at my sister, I felt a sense of closure and a glimmer of hope for the future. Life had tested us in ways we could never have imagined, but we had come through it stronger and wiser. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were heading in the right direction. Thank you for following our story. Have you ever had to give someone a second chance? How did it turn out? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences.